I'm Dr. Andrea Thomas. I'm here with Purdue Center for Intercultural Learning, Mentorship, Assessment, and Research. It rolls right off the tongue. And thank you to my colleagues from Purdue Polytechnic who have allowed me to be here, Elizabeth Barajas, and I'm joined also with Colin Gray. So I'm Andrea Thomas, as I mentioned. Some of my background experiences, I've been in the COIL space now for 9 years. From K through 12 all the way up to higher education. I was also the head of international programs at a university. So you name it, I've either implemented a COIL or I've led the facilitation process and development, scaling, all of those things at a university. I've done that with American Council on Education, American Councils for International Education, the SUNY COIL Center, and most recently with the USC Viterbi School of Engineering on some of their initiatives. And so I would like to approach the whole COIL space from a very meta level view, which is the fourth industrial context, because why do you do a COIL experience? I think it's very interesting and easy to start considering, oh my goodness, COIL, it's so meaningful. It makes my students feel good. I feel good. I love the world. I'm going to connect my students with the world. We're all just going to be really happy. But how do you do that, right? There's the conceptual knowledge of what a COIL learning experience might be. And there's also the procedural knowledge of how to implement it. It stops everybody every time, you know? So there's like this idea that we could connect our faculty and we could come up with something, but we don't know where to begin, right? So there's this great idea. And so I'll get into the different versions of COIL and virtual exchange in a little bit, but in 2016, the World Economic Forum published its key predictions on the fourth industrial revolution. And when I used to talk about it in 2017, people would look at me and say, oh, that's nice. But we know that in 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic was a catalyst to creating us and pivoting us into this digital context. It's like, oh my goodness, universities that used to say, no, you must report to work in person at all times, all of a sudden have made their policies a lot more lenient and everybody could work from home, right? So all of these procedures and policies that existed before have now somehow been loosened. And our world evolved. In fact, the fourth industrial revolution, or excuse me, the World Economic Forum predicts that the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic will be 40 years from now, right? And if you think about the case of 9/11 in the US context, it happened in the year 2001. The whole entire world changed. The way we walk through airports changed. The way we interact with each other and trust each other changed. And further to that point, if you want to think about change, in the year 2007, the iPhone came out. Actually, the iPod, right? The iPhone wasn't even out. And now if you think about it, everywhere you go, even in rural areas, people have iPhones. And so we're accelerating at a rate of connectivity. In fact, in 2016, we were connected by mobile technology as a world at 46%. And then it's estimated that by 2025, we would be at 95% connectivity. I'm not making that number up. Go ahead and fact check me, because that's coming from the World Economic Forum. And in fact, I think we're ahead of schedule. And again, I emphasize mobile technology. That's not to consider the places where there isn't any infrastructure in place and that there's still a divide. So the fourth industrial context is on these cyber physical systems, right? So we had the mechanization, water, power, and steam, production, computer and automation, and now we have these systems that are talking to each other. And so if you think about a COIL experience, we're creating these systems where we talk to each other. And the purpose of that is to develop and to create intentional design and effective communication to produce something. So connected devices, coordinating improved service and infrastructure. And when we're developing a COIL experience, we're developing the infrastructure to create the conditions for students and faculty to collaborate effectively. So it's really important to think about that in that context, because I think it really helps us understand and identify why and how we're going to do a COIL experience. And so this would be a consideration of an ecosystem, right? We have the natural ecosystem, which is so beautifully represented here in Switzerland. And we have the United Nations ecosystem, which my colleagues know for the last few days I've been saying, that's really the first great COIL experience, if you think about it, because it was created during a time, the United Nations was founded in 1945, in a really dark time in history, which was after the Holocaust, which then they came up with these beliefs and values that as a world, as a collective, they brought everybody to a space together to talk about how they could change the world and how we should operate. So if you hear in the conversations, the Sustainable Development Goals, they are now about 22 years old. They were created first as the Millennium Development Goals and then evolved at the year 2015 into the Sustainable Development Goals. And so All of these world leaders have been working steadily for years to identify the pain points of the world so that we could come together and to create solutions for those problems. And so that's another important consideration when we think about a COIL experience. And then we have our digital ecosystems, right? Where we have our Wi-Fi and connectivity. It makes us feel happy. The first thing we go into a place, like, where's the Wi-Fi password? I don't have any connection. And actually, Colin and Elizabeth saved my life yesterday because they told me about EDU Rome, which I didn't know about. So now all of a sudden I have this connectivity and it's really easy going. In that connectivity, we have the ability to contact our family. I mean, I've spoken to my family every day. And if you think about it, maybe, 20 years ago, you're like, oh, let's schedule a Skype call. If I don't know, maybe I have my timing wrong. But it all seems to have emerged so well and it's going really fast. So an ecosystem is just a complex network of interconnected systems, and our COIL connections and our university partnerships are just complex systems of connecting people with each other. So how do we create connection? So one of the things that I want to talk about is educational design in the age of digital interdependence, right? The point in my view, because everybody's reason for participating in or leading and facilitating a COIL course will vary. And so for me, my personal desire is that I believe that having a COIL experience will create the conditions for my students to have the opportunity to get to know one another, to develop mutual understanding, and eventually promote world peace. Like I said, this is how I feel, this is what I want to see happen. But of course, we're in the higher education space and there are some real learning outcomes that need to be produced. So another reason why you might do a virtual exchange or a COIL experience is to create innovation, right? To spark innovation, to create new products, new solutions, to give students the practical and applied experience of being able to create those solutions, to build an inclusive and digital economy and society. The fourth industrial context is the digital age. We have the sharing economy, right? Where we share resources through horizontal partnerships. We have developed human and institutional capacity. That's what goal 4 of the Sustainable Development Goals: protect human rights and human agency, digital trust, security, and stability. I think Diana talked about that when she was talking about data protection laws and things of that nature worldwide, and foster global digital cooperation. So wouldn't it be great? And I now learned that this is called abductive reasoning. Thank you, Dr. Gray. Wouldn't it be great, right, if this alliance then grew so that we could all just continue these multi-year collaborations with ease to provide X for our students? You determine what the X is. I can't tell you what that should be. And so essentially you're creating, all of you online, all of you in here, an educational ecosystem to facilitate and provide COIL, virtual exchange, and global opportunity. Yes, Andrea, we know that. That's why you're here. Virtual exchange. So oftentimes we talk about this in a really kind of technical way. It's really just faculty collaboration and partnership to design collaborative learning opportunities for students. Full stop. It's that simple. But collaborative online international learning is a little bit different because you have 2 faculty who are coming together with their syllabi to examine where there are opportunities for collaboration to design new experiences for their students, to then create something new. So it is a very big undertaking. And so it's really important to create the knowledge around the difference between, oh, our faculty are coming together. We just want to, come up with some ideas and see how this is going to go. And then there's no, we're designing this. We're designing this and we're creating these applied learning experiences for our students to learn how to collaborate. And for our students to collaborate effectively, us as faculty, we have to collaborate effectively as well, right? And how many of you have actually implemented a COIL experience in this room? Who's done one? You've done one. You've done one. It's like dating. It has to be a healthy, happy marriage. You have to communicate well. You have to be kind, right? You have to make sure that you plan and discuss what some of the challenges are, work them out. I've never been married, so you tell me.
That's the COIL Tinder.
Welcome to COIL Tinder. My name is Andrea Thomas. And so those elements of virtual exchange and that component for faculty and for students would be to build trust, to build experience, share experience, come up with a collaborative project design, present, and reflect. Also, faculty partnership to identify course themes, to integrate syllabi, to launch and co-lead a course through faculty partnership. And then the elements of COIL Virtual Exchange would be that we have the opportunity to share our thoughts, to share our beliefs, to share our feelings, and to talk about our actions. And one of the, such a simple thing to say, but one of the things I really love to say is 2 + 2 = 4, and 1 + 3 = 4. And we know that it equals 4, but how we got there was different. And I think that's what really makes the COIL experience special. It's like, oh, why did you do 1 + 3? Well, I'm used to doing it that way. Why did you do 2 + 2? I mean, that just seems so basic. Obviously, 2 + 2 = 4, but having that dialogue and creating that opportunity for the dialogue. So as I mentioned, we're creating trust. And so when you're creating trust, you have to think about the psychological safety of those who are participating. And so I started off by saying, hello, Stephen, hello, Diana, hello, Jan, and so on and so forth. And because the idea is that people need to feel welcome. If people are going to have the freedom to participate in a class, to share their ideas, I mean, if you've ever been in an online meeting, sometimes it's like 5 minutes before the meeting begins, it opens up, everybody's really quiet. Okay, we'll get started in just one bit. I mean, is that a community? I know for me, I work at Purdue University and I live in New York. And I have been able to develop real relationships with the people who I work with. And some of that comes from really designed experiences, right? We're going to sit down and have a coffee chat. Doesn't matter that we're online. So you can create community. Community can exist online. It doesn't have to be, any particular length of time. I'm literally in month 3, and I feel like I know my colleagues at Purdue really well. I can, talk with them. So we can do that with design. So what do you call a bear with no teeth?
Cuddly.
What'd you say?
Cuddly.
Cuddly. Ooh, that's a new one. What do you call, anybody else?
Teddy.
A gummy bear. And it turns out that laughter really helps us build that trust. And in fact, it's one of the quickest ways to connect. Actually, I had a link there, but it didn't come up. And it's a short 3-minute TED Talk. Where did it go? Let me see if it'll load. Nope. Anyway, it wasn't meant to be. Another thing you'll learn with a COIL experience, just let it go. Let it go. And so it was 2 women talking about how in the workforce, when we're children, we know how to laugh, we know how to express our emotions. And then all of a sudden we go into the workforce and we think that there's this one way of being. And, we think to ourselves, we must, stand tall, we must be this. And that's, the way it used to be. And then she said that there was a global index of laughter. And she said from the age of maybe 10, it went from this high to this low slope, and then it picked up again around 80. And then she said the unfortunate reality was that the life expectancy of those who were surveyed was around 78. So she was basically talking about how do we make, more opportunities for laughter. And so laughter would help us build community, develop trust, break the ice, decrease anxiety and stress, and increase motivation. Increase motivation. We talked about that in the last session. Increase motivation. I mean, how do you motivate students to participate in a COIL experience? They're dealing with all of their identity, right? It's like, who am I, right? All of a sudden, I'm from West Lafayette, Indiana, and now I'm engaging with my, my new friends in Chile, right? And what is SIPO? SIPO, I'm sorry. When I went to Chile and I didn't understand what SIPO means. And then I heard this Japanese diplomat say something really profound. He's half Japanese, half Romanian. And he said, his name is Koji Murafushi. He had the chance to go to Romania, where his mother's from. And then he realized, he said, how do you know who you are if you never have the chance to leave where you're from? Because we're all operating in our own context and everybody believes they're right. And they are in their context. And so there are 4 intelligence types in the 4th Industrial Revolution, which are contextual, emotional, inspirational, and physical. I'll say those again because I didn't make a slide for it and I always mean to. Contextual, emotional, inspirational, and physical. And I think why COIL is so popular is because it brings all of those into our frame, right? The context of the world, that's what we're introducing to our students. There's this emotional element of it because now I have new friends, I have somewhere to go. You know, I never would have thought I was ever be in Switzerland, and here I am. And that happened through talking about COIL and so on and so forth, right? All these mobility pieces that we're talking about, but also that feeling of belonging and that feeling of connection and that feeling of possibility, that feeling of trusting that the world is bigger and kinder than we make it out to be in media and society. Inspirational. Our projects that we create together, that we collaborate with for each other, can be meaningful. They can produce a real result in society. And so we can design those in a way that helps us to think about, what does it mean to create change and how can I be effective at it? Icebreaker. In a perfect world, that would be all on one line. Yeah, let it go, right? And so, as I mentioned, humor is one of those things that helps us, you know, really create trust. And so, as I mentioned, we greet everybody in the beginning of the class. That's one way to diffuse the tensions of what's happening in this classroom. Obviously, if you have 100 people in the class, you could just cherry pick or tell everybody to introduce themselves in the chat. But another really important element of a COIL experience is an icebreaker. At this point, if you're in this room, you know that an icebreaker is really important. And so my personal favorite is 2 truths and a lie. And those I went out to dinner with last night cannot participate in this part. So 2 truths and a lie. Let's see, who would like to figure out which one's the lie? You should call it out, call it out.
Russian.
No?
No.
Меня зовут Andrea Thomas. Я живу в Кыргызстане и Казахстане.
Russian.
Yeah, huh? It is my Russian. It may not be your standard, but I learned, you know, that's what I learned. Yeah.
I've been to Paris.
I've never been to Paris. That's right.
It was the simplest one.
Right, one of
Generally,
these is not
we
like
get
the
you
other.
applies.
Right, one of these is not like the other. Yes, that's me. I haven't been to Paris, although I have been to Charles de Gaulle Airport many times, and unfortunately have never been able to break free. And so this is, you know, one of those really great party tricks, if you will, that helps us, you know, just kind of like laugh a little bit. It doesn't have to be that serious. And so we're creating these opportunities for our COIL experience to do applied learning. I would actually say that one of the most important takeaways from a COIL experience is soft skills training, right? Especially there was a study that was done that showed that, you know, 40% of students in the university aged space, and I don't know what the current statistic would be, had a decrease in empathy. Our social, you know, and media and connectivity can desensitize us to world events, so much so that we're like, oh, yes, there was, you know, and I don't want to make light of it, but you understand, yes, insert horrible traumatic event in the world here. And it's like, oh, wow. And that's not good. We can't turn a blind eye. And actually, that's something that we have biologically as humans, something called selective perception. And we're easily turning a blind eye because part of that is survival, right? It's like, I just don't have the emotional capacity to think about this right now. And so I turn my eye. So decreased empathy, that's one way of looking at empathy. Then they have the design thinking part, which I got into a great conversation with my colleagues about recently, but the design thinking part is like, how do we design solutions for X? And we can name it design thinking. We can call it an empathy interview where we focus on an individual, when we focus on what their needs are and what their outcomes will be. Or we can say, who's our key stakeholder population, right? That's another way to look at the design thinking element. Is like, what are their needs and what are we going to provide for them? Well, as COIL practitioners, you cannot provide the motivation, but you can facilitate opportunity for motivation, right? And you can create the organizational infrastructure to make a COIL experience effective. You can, you know, organize the infrastructure to make a COIL experience something that you can build out year in year and not reinvent the wheel. And through your COIL experience, you can certainly share new knowledge, right? That's the point. In many ways, we share new knowledge, we take on new perspectives, we gain the ability to work in teams more effectively, we create perspective, we introduce problem-solving skills, right? Just let it go. Either let it go or, you know, solve it. What could we do differently the next time? That's why multi-year collaborations are so, I think, encouraged, because if you had a bad experience in the first COIL implementation, it doesn't mean you're going to have a bad COIL experience. In fact, you're probably going to do better the next time, unless you become a little arrogant and forget to do, important steps in the planning process. And then you're like, oh, this time it didn't go so well. COIL is stupid. No, you forgot to take all those really important front-loaded planning steps that help make your COIL experience effective the first time around. And of course, there are interpersonal skills. When you're on camera, you're almost required to have your personality shine through in some way, and it will, whether you like it or not. And as facilitators, we're creating and building relationships for collaboration, intercultural dialogue, global community building, innovation, and discovery skills, ... Because whatever you're doing in your COIL classroom, or whatever your faculty are doing in their COIL classrooms, is subjective, right? We had a discussion recently about some COIL experiences that were automated technology paired with dance. What's going to come from that? Who cares? Uh-oh. Please, it was, a really rewarding experience for the students involved, because aside from a study abroad experience, in what capacity were they going to engage with someone else from a different part of the world? So not only that part of meeting new friends and making new friends, but these ballerinas now know how to do an oil change. I mean, come on. But anyway, there's really no limit or boundary around what this experience can be like. And so that's what I think in terms of discovery skills. So for new innovations, Clayton Christensen talks about discovery skills. Is this the discovery skills that you talk about, Colin? Yeah, Clayton Christensen, yeah. So take a look at discovery skills, because the idea is that we don't know what we don't know. And so when you present new opportunities, and again, there's no one right way to do anything. Now you're thinking along the lines of, oh, maybe 1 + 3 is a more effective way, or maybe I could incorporate a new way to, put 1 + 3 into a sentence today, right? Insert new word here. So again, we're just leveraging different ideas, different perspectives, and different assumptions, so that insert X for learning outcome here, and creating design or creative design for intentional collaboration. As I mentioned, the fourth industrial context, the fourth industrial revolution has those 4 intelligence types, and at the top is contextual understanding. And contextual understanding is best achieved by direct engagement through dialogue and collaboration, right? So international interaction, content, and context. And I think those are the really important parts about a COIL experience that you should consider when you're trying to design it. I know there are many technical elements and behind the scenes items that are to be considered. And again, as Diana mentioned, that could be a whole nother day of a workshop. And I think this is a really wonderful starting off point, to build off of. So again, in your context, for whether or not you're somebody who is leading COIL at your institution, or if you are the faculty who are developing, the step 1 would be identify who your key stakeholder population is, right? And then determine what the purpose of the course is supposed to be, right? So if your goal as a COIL facilitator is to create innovation, or to spark and foster innovation among your students, what kind of experiences would you design to do that, right? Okay. For example, Daniela?
Yeah.
No. Valentina. Oh gosh. I'm sorry. I've met everybody within the last 2 days, that I'm just mixing everybody up. Valentina said that they've looked at this model now where it's 4 weeks. So okay, we know we have 4 weeks. In that 4 weeks, what are we going to do? We're going to have our students meet X number of times, and we're going to facilitate that during class time, or we're going to have them decide what method of engagement they're going to use with each other. So WhatsApp, WeChat, Facebook, you name it. And then we're going to give them something to talk about, right? So it could be an article, and then they have to, share their views on that. Or it could be, find some articles that you think about the context of the world and share those here. What is talking about world affairs look like in your context? It's a tricky one, because that can lead to some really hard conversations. If you are not willing to, kind of shepherd those conversations, I would just stay away. But, then there's that performance goal, right? So spark new innovation, and so that we can influence perhaps the sustainable development goals in some way. So there's that curricular element of taking a look at the syllabus. And then from our syllabus, our combined syllabi, what is the performance goal for our students? And then there's like, what are our goals together as faculty? What's our performance goal? Well, our mission statement would be to produce an effective COIL exchange. Great. What does that look like to you, Elizabeth? What does an effective COIL exchange look like to you? Tell me. I'd love to know. Well, an effective collaboration looks like to me that we build this community among our students. It might look like, yes, it means that X number of our students will then go on to graduate school because they will be inspired by, whatever facilities and mechanisms they see in engineering, right? Which I personally was very inspired by yesterday.
Nothing, you can continue to see what
Okay,
you sensor.
no problem. Okay.
I read a little bit.
Well, that hot air, Andrea. I thought it was a fire alarm.
No, it's
Okay.
CO2 sensor.
There's soft skills development. So like, from what of those soft skills do we really want to foster at them? Because sometimes people think, I can't foster soft skills. People have their personalities, but I know I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago, right? And actually, the first virtual exchange experience that I had the opportunity to do was about 10 years ago, right? And to get a little bit more emotional and intrinsic with what I'm saying about that experience, what caught me for the rest of my life, right? It's just I changed, right? It was that murmur moment or that hard pivot where I could no longer be the same. I was living in Kyrgyzstan, and I connected my students at a club at an American Corner with students from a high school that I attended, my high school. And my kids students in Kyrgyzstan, it was 4:30 p.m. and it was 6 a.m. in New York. And the students in New York were eating bagels. Really, really commonplace in the United States, right? In Kyrgyzstan, my students, they were like, "Are you eating in the classroom?" And I couldn't believe it, because to me that was normal. And my students in Kyrgyzstan were like, "You eat in the classroom? That's so interesting. You go home and you have a meal with your family in Kyrgyzstan. You do not eat at school." And then it just sparked this really curious discussion. What do you like to do for fun? And it was the look on their faces. It was a real gift to be able to have that kind of free experience where, there didn't have to be an academic performance goal attached. It was just kind of like, yeah, I'm from Kyrgyzstan. I'm from New York. What's up? And so it was just changed me. It was a really wonderful experience. So in closing, because that was all a lot, and I thank you for your attention, the outcome of your experience is always going to be determined by your why, right? So here's the purpose of our virtual exchange. And that might seem like low-hanging fruit, but that is really hard for people to grasp sometimes, right? Why are you doing this to begin with? And, I think from the faculty perspective, there's, who are you serving? There is this one hand, and you can speak to this, right? There is this one hand where it's like, well, we're looking to meet our, internationalization goals at the university and to support those internationalization goals at the university. And then there's, I teach this, and I know that two things in the world that we can't avoid are collaboration and globalization. Things that we will need, that is just not avoidable. And so therefore, I want to create opportunities for my students to develop X. So purpose of virtual exchange combined with the performance goals, make sure you're clear on those goals, because how you design that experience will determine the effectiveness of it, right? How do you measure those outcomes if you don't know exactly what goals you're trying to produce in the first place? And so define stakeholder goal. And then actually, if you want to consider that as the possibility of a backwards design map, now you consider your defined stakeholder goal, and then you go to those performance goals. So what are those indicators that would help you achieve those performance goals or those stakeholder goals? Which then goes back to the mission statement of your virtual exchange. And you gain perspective. I thought it was done. You gain perspective and learn from different thoughts of other students in constructive ways. So as I mentioned, I'm here with the Center of Intercultural Learning, Mentorship, Assessment, and Research. And we have something that's called Hubical. And or Hub ICL is actually Intercultural Learning Hub, and it's free. It does require that you develop or you create a registration to participate, but that's actually going to be lifted at the end of this calendar year. And so you should be able to access the resources in the Hub ICL with more ease. And so it's a database of hundreds if not thousands, of pieces of useful intercultural learning tools that you can access and incorporate based on your needs. So there are a lot of ways that you can sort and filter based on your community building techniques. And as I mentioned, this session is about community building. And so I have two ones that you can, hopefully when you get these slides, you can, click on or copy and paste, but intercultural learning in teams and icebreakers and community building. But certainly if you wanted to take a look, there is one really interesting video. I think it's actually from Germany. And it talks about three people sitting at a table and, they're having dialogue with each other, and each one of them, you can hear this internal monologue, right? Gee, she's so pretty. I just, how does she look so polished all the time? I wish I could look like that. And then you have this like, this woman always speaks so much. I just wish she would just shut up. And then you have another person thinking about like, nobody loves me. Nobody cares. Man, I'm ready to go home and go to sleep. And I just don't want to be here. And so then it's talking about, this meeting and how everybody's having these different thoughts. And some people think the meeting went well and others are like, that was terrible. But it's meant to capture perspective and also to highlight these intercultural nuances that we have. Define culture as you will. It doesn't always have to be, geography. It doesn't always have to be ethnicity. It doesn't have to be, anything along those lines. So with that, I wonder if you have any questions. I know I took you for the full spectrum of the fourth industrial context in the COIL sphere. So I welcome any questions that you may have. Thank you. No questions could be good or bad. Did I hear the start of a question? Oh, there's chat. Okay. Tillman says, great perspective looking at COILs from this meta level. Thank you so much. That's step one as well for finding partners with COIL. One of the greater successes that I've had, because I know that was a question that came up earlier, was I think for a first-time COIL experience, if you have a friend who is, in the academy in another part of the world, just invite your friend to have a dialogue about the possibility of it, right? So, one of the things that I found really useful at the institutional level was having faculty who did come to the United States from a different part of the world, looking to then go back and like partner with a family member or a friend, say in Turkey or, in Taiwan. And the goal was, their learning goal was to allow the opportunity for their students to gain that world experience. So language happens to be one of those real areas that people lean into because it's like, oh, this would be such a there's so much utility or utilitarian value on learning language in an immersive context, right? So, I think somebody mentioned here COIL Connect. COIL Connect is a good resource. But honestly, LinkedIn, if you just post and say, I'm looking for a COIL partner, I'm pretty sure someone in your network is like, oh my God, I'm looking for a COIL partner too, or I know somebody who's looking for this person, and then so on and so forth. So just making those communications open and available. Also, Class to Class is a platform that was designed for virtual exchange. And so they have a mechanism where you can look for COIL partners as well. And it's a click of a button that says, I'm looking for a partner. And then you can also use it as a learning management system as well to facilitate your COIL experience. Because some of the pain points that facilitators of COIL experiences have is, what learning management system are we going to use to do this, right? Brightspace might have some elements where you can enroll external participants, but, it might be useful to just do Google Classroom, even if you don't like it, because now you have a neutral space for learning that everyone can access. And in some cases, depending on the country, you have to anticipate that these students are going to be participating on their mobile phone, right? And not being, not using a computer. So anyhow, I'm here. I'm so thankful to be here, and thank you all for your time and attention.